sound. Can you guys hear me? Let's try that over again. Wanted to thank Get the Tea for sponsoring this video. It is organic life change tea with no GMOs, no caffeine. It's great for some weight loss, some digestive slowdown. You can drop a couple pounds. Go to getthetea.com. Check it out. I drink it. It's delicious. It's good tea. And they're sponsoring this video. So thank you guys. Sorry about that. You know, sometimes I just have these technical difficulties and I can't help it. Good to see you guys. Good to see you. Fentanyl. Interesting topic. Caused a lot of controversy over the past couple days, 24 hours or so for me. And I wanted to share it with you guys what's been going on. So I'm going to tell you what I found in the beginning, and then I'm going to lay it all out for you guys in black and white going on. There was an article that came out that the Mexican government seized a major fentanyl shipment from China in Mexico. Over 25 tons of fentanyl seized from Mexico on its way to the Sinaloa cartel. 25.75 tons of this seized in Mexico that originated from Shanghai, China. Now, Donald Trump's been talking about what a problem fentanyl is. It is a very, 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 yes, it'll be different than the podcast. It is a very, very dangerous drug. And he has been talking about it for a long time now and what kind of detriment it is. So there was a thread done by Brian on Twitter after Ryan Saavedra tweeted this article. Brian Cates did a thread talking about just how much fentanyl we're talking about here, how many people it can kill, which it could basically wipe out everyone in this country. This is 25 tons. And I said, because I'd read over the past several months, I've read that fentanyl is actually affecting law enforcement agents and first responders because they're coming in contact with it. There are reports out there that them touching it or inhaling it is causing them to overdose, and what a problem it is. On the go production. How's that better? Turn up the volume a little bit on my end here. So this should be better. So basically, first responders are coming in contact with this drug, which you need like a tiny little amount of to overdose. Look, this is heroin versus fentanyl, right? And I added to the equation that you don't have to be the one taking it to die from it. You can die if you inhale it or it gets on your skin. And I made a point to talk about how horrible this is and how dangerous it is to the public at large, to the first responders, you know, going to these calls. And an interesting thing started happening where a lot of people came to my thread and started telling me that I was wrong and sharing misinformation and that it wasn't true and that none of those reports have been confirmed with toxicology reporting and that it was dangerous or misleading for me to be saying this. And, you know, once you get a bunch of these comments from different people, many of which were doctors and anesthesiologists who were nasty, nasty people, I got to be honest, you start to question, what is the deal here? What is this all about? Am I wrong? Is it misinformation? Is there something else causing this? Let me look into it further. So that's what I did. And what I found was this, that it is a mix of truth between the people that are saying first responders can overdose and die from this and the people that are saying that they cannot. And I'm going to go through the compelling reasons on both. Some of the points that the people saying that this was misinformation and dangerous to be spreading made were that fentanyl cannot be absorbed into your skin by skin to powder contact and cause you any harm at all, that you can wash it off with soap and water, that it is not a danger to law enforcement in that form, and that it molecularly cannot happen. It cannot be passed through your skin in that way. They also, people who were opponents of my thread where I cite the law enforcement examples, also said that you need exposure to the substance when it's touching you hours and hours and hours, that there was a patch developed and the technology in the patch for fentanyl isn't even good enough, and that uses moisture to transmit into your skin. And so, look, I just wanted to get to the bottom of it. I don't give a crap if you fall on the left side of the spectrum or the right side of the spectrum. I just want to know what the hell is going on with this right now. I just want to know what the hell is going on. Is it a threat for our law enforcement officers? Is it not? If it's not, why are all these law enforcement officers going to the hospital after being on these calls with these symptoms, and what's the deal? So let's go through some of the misinformation, disinformation, and fact, so we get the story. One of the articles, or one of these studies that everybody was telling me to take a look at, was done by, I believe, the American College of Toxicity. And here, the American College of Medical Toxicity. And this right here is the gold standard in studies that people use to cite the disinformation that was put out by even the government on first responders responding to these sorts of calls for overdoses or for, drug calls in general. And what they say is this. They have an article. That's the wrong link. Hold on. It was this one I wanted. Sorry, guys. Bear with me. Fentanyl and its analogs are potent opioid receptor agonists, but the risk of clinically significant exposure to emergency responders is extremely low. To date, we have not seen reports of emergency responders developing signs or symptoms consistent with opioid toxicity from incidental contact with opioids. Incidental dermal absorption is unlikely to cause opioid toxicity. For routine handling of drug, nitrile gloves provide sufficient dermal protection. In exceptional circumstances where there are drug particles or droplets suspended in the air, an N95 respirator provides sufficient protection. Workers who may encounter fentanyl or fentanyl analogs should be trained to recognize the signs and symptoms of opioid intoxication, have naloxone readily available, and be trained to administer naloxone and provide active medical assistance. In the unlikely event of poisoning, that agent should be administered to those with objective signs of hypoventilation or a depressed level of consciousness, and not for vague concerns such as dizziness or anxiety. So they go into a lot of reasons why what they're saying is true scientifically, their methodology, the inhalation exposure risk here. It is an exposure route of concern if drug particles are suspended in the air. Fentanyl has potentially high bioavailability by inhalation, and it is highly suspected that a weaponized aerosolized containing carfentanil and remifentanil were used to subdue hostage takers of a Moscow theater in 2002. Basically, what they're saying is if this is weaponized with aerosol or aerosolized and sprayed into the air, it's very dangerous. They don't really comment on airborne particles that are dry, like if somebody blew it in your face. They say how incidental dermal absorption is unlikely to cause toxicity, and talk about how the patches would need to cover a certain surface area of your body and sit there for hours and hours and hours to even receive 100 mcg of fentanyl. And they go through the study around it. And basically, every other study that I found, or article that I found, references this one position paper. Honestly, I have a list here of all the no chance this is actually possible articles. I have about 20 of them that say there's absolutely no way that any first responders could ever get any of this could ever harm first responders, basically. Here's the Harm Reduction Coalition, who have done a lot of work on this all over the country. There are chapters of them everywhere. They say perpetuating stigma, causing harm. And they talk about stories that detail an incident where 2 sheriff's department personnel experienced the effects of fentanyl exposure. And the articles vary greatly in their accounts of what drugs were present at the scene and what symptoms were exhibited, but they all contain misinformation, inaccuracies about fentanyl and overdose, and perpetuate fear-based messaging that stigmatized people who use drugs. And I'll be honest with you, at the core of all of this is a comparison, and interwoven throughout all of these articles is a comparison to what happened with the AIDS virus, where misinformation was out there that it could be spread from contact, and it stigmatized the entire thing, and then people supposedly weren't getting treatment and they were cast aside and all of that. And I have to be honest with you, it's not the same thing in my opinion, because what these people are basically saying is that people who are overdosing on fentanyl, many of whom don't realize they're taking fentanyl and are taking some other drug which is laced with fentanyl, which is an entire another story that we can get into another time, are not getting the life-saving treatment they need in a rapid fashion, because seconds count here, because officers are protecting themselves in gear before they're going in to take care of these people who are overdosing, thereby risking these people's lives because they're falsely afraid that they can inhale fentanyl from the room and get sick and overdose. Listen, that's ridiculous. I'm sorry. This article is written like propaganda, and I don't care what side, like anybody who's been up my butt all day on these threads about how I'm wrong. This is not written to help educate anybody. It's written to destigmatize overdose and drug use. I'm sorry, but it is. And I want to show you why I'm saying that. New York Times. I had a New York Times op-ed, but I didn't, for some reason I didn't copy the link. And I'll share all these links for everybody because I have plenty of them. Such scaremongering poses a potentially deadly threat. When Iraq fired Scud missiles at Israel during the war in 1991, many people near the first blast reported breathing problems, which made sense in light of fears that missiles carried chemical or biological weapons. But it turned out that the missiles had no such payloads, meaning the symptoms were a product of anxious anticipation rather than physical causes. Something similar seems to be happening in the U.S. among police officers who encounter people who have overdosed on illicit fentanyl. The latest example is an incident in Hazleton, Pennsylvania, early last Friday morning when 3 officers responded to a call about a man who had overdosed. WBRE, the NBC station in Wilkes-Barre, reports that all 3 became ill, and it could have been much worse. And after the officers were, quote, exposed to the highly addictive and potentially deadly opioid fentanyl, 1 officer nearly overdosed while 2 felt unwell. They went to the hospital, and then Reason goes on to say how difficult it is to absorb fentanyl through the skin. The likelihood the officers were feeling the narcotics effect is approximately 0. It's just, there's no such thing as instant addiction. They just basically go on to shit all over the cops that say that they experienced these effects from the drug. And their explanation for why these police officers are reacting in this way is that it's in their minds. What they basically say in all of these studies and all of these papers that I've read is that police officers have been conditioned to believe that in, walking into a scene or a crime scene where there's fentanyl around or dealing with it in a car or whatever will cause them to overdose. So because of that, they freak out and have a panic attack, and that's what's causing their symptoms. Could that be possible? Sure, I suppose. But the problem that I'm having with all of this, and again, I promise you, I will do a thread on Twitter, and I will put in the description box on YouTube and other platforms that I'm broadcasting on right now, and I will put all of the links to all these articles. I've read a lot of them. So again, doctors from the American Colleges of Medical Toxicity say that it is impossible for you to touch fentanyl and experience toxicity. That's what they're saying. They're saying it's not possible. But the problem that I'm having with it is that the government has other warnings. Now, I tried to find other examples of other drugs that the government has issued warnings like this about. I tried to find if they had done this with heroin or with oxycodone or hydrocodone or any other drug that you could possibly encounter, and I wasn't able to find anything. Does that mean that nothing exists? No. But I did do an exhaustive search on trying to find any other guidance for law enforcement outside of the normal stuff, like, the gloves and all that stuff. I've got here. Let's do this first. This is the CDC, which the people that are in the comments saying that this stuff is all crazy town. This is the CDC video, the Center for Disease Control and Prevention. This was published March of this year, and it says in the description, this video will help emergency responders understand the risks and what they can do to protect themselves from exposure to illicit drugs. It shows what happens when an officer is exposed to illicit drugs like fentanyl and provides recommendations on how other officers and responders can prevent it from happening to them. Now, maybe the government is just going out of its way to show this video to people just to fearmonger and scare law enforcement. Maybe. Or maybe this is actually a real thing.
217.
This is a real call.
Man, can you get to the door?
Step inside.
You okay?
Watch out, sir.
Where's you at?
You got a call for an overdose.
I wasn't an
Back up.
overdose.
Hey.
It was just.
Back up.
I was just nervous because my husband.
Where's he at?
We made it. Where's your husband?
He's fine now.
Where is he?
Where is he?
He left. He left.
Who's in the bathroom? Open the door now!
He didn't respond
Out.
to me.
That way.
That way.
Let's see on the bed.
You deal with that, I'll deal with this.
There's white powder on the table.
At this point, entry's already been made into the room. Sergeant Pitts and Officer Tiernan had left to go get a search warrant, and we're just holding the room for the search warrant to be obtained so we can execute it. The female's on the bed. She's complaining that she has quote-unquote allergies, so she needed to blow her nose. I went to get her a towel because I had knocked the box of tissues into the toilet. I gave her a towel, and
Basically what this is going to go through is this officer needs the aerosol counteractive because he is experiencing the effects of fentanyl from that towel. He's wearing gloves, he's wearing a mask, but his mask is not on properly. And it goes through, and this is a real call. This is legitimate. So I'm going to put this link down there so you can watch it, but I watched this whole entire video, what could be done differently, blah, blah, blah. Now, you can argue the CDC is corrupt. You can argue that the OIG's office is corrupt. You can argue that the DEA is corrupt and the CBP is corrupt and the Environmental Protection Agency is corrupt, and all of them are just lying about the precautions you should take when dealing with a possible situation in regards to fentanyl as a first responder. And not protect yourself. Here's from the White House directly. This is the final standard safety recommendations for first responders when dealing with fentanyl. And here is what they say. And this is why I say it's a mixture of both. Fentanyl can be present in a variety of forms. Inhalation of airborne powder is most likely to lead to harmful effects, but is less likely to occur than skin contact. Incidental skin contact may occur during daily activities, but is not expected to lead to harmful effects if the contaminated skin is promptly washed off with water. Personal protective equipment is effective in protecting you from exposure. Slow breathing, no breathing, drowsiness or unresponsiveness, and constricted or pinpoint pupils are the specific signs consistent with fentanyl intoxication. Naloxone is an effective medicine that rapidly reverses the effects of fentanyl. And I really hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. They have this whole chart here: wear gloves, avoid actions that may cause the powder to become airborne, use a properly fitted mask, follow your department guidelines if the scene involves large amounts of fentanyl, make sure that you follow the guidelines that are given to you, what you should do, blah, blah, blah. Collaborated with collaborative support from all of these agencies listed down here on the bottom of the flyer, including the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health. So there's obviously a concern here about first responders contacting fentanyl. Let's take a look at there was another video that I wanted to show you. I think it was from, Customs and Border Patrol, who deal with this all the time, a lot more lately. Why didn't that happen?
Jefferson County 911.
There's a gentleman in the bathroom.
Is the door locked or?
Yes, and we don't have a key.
2182 responding to West Washington Street.
The help is on the way.
Okay.
So you can see this slide says information about fentanyl is causing confusion among first responders, because initially the reporting was that you could die by just touching this stuff, and they've revised that. They have revised that. This is kind of cheesy. It gets a little bit cheesy, and like their little like interactions here on this crime scene. They're not the best actors, but let me just skip to the doctor.
That's becoming more and more prevalent in the drug world. It's actually more potent than heroin or morphine, and even some of its analogs, such as carfentanil, are much more potent than that. Fentanyl has been seen in powder, tablet, capsule, rock, nasal spray. The forms are always changing. What we've seen in the last few years with fentanyl is a rise in the number of deaths associated with its use.
First responders are increasingly likely to encounter fentanyl in the line of duty. We want to make sure that they have the facts to keep them safe.
I got this on my hands!
Well, one myth is that just touching any amount of fentanyl is likely to cause severe illness or injury or even death, and that's just not true. Incidental skin contact with fentanyl.
Hey man, what's going on?
Fentanyl can be washed off with soap and water.
Wash your hands. You'll be okay.
Think?
Yes.
All right.
You don't want to use hand sanitizer because that can actually potentially increase the absorption of fentanyl. Exposure can come in many ways: through skin contact, through the mucous membranes of your mouth, your eyes, or the most significant risk is from aerosolized airborne powder. Another myth is that PPE, or personal protective equipment, won't protect you from fentanyl. And the truth is that in most circumstances, it will offer a significant level of protection. And gloves will protect from the skin exposure, skin contamination of your hands. The respirator mask will prevent the inhalation of an airborne powder. Wearing eye protection can prevent the exposure through the mucous membranes of your eyes.
Hey, can you check her breathing?
All right. Ma'am, are you all right?
The rest of the video is actually pretty good. I'm not gonna show you the rest of it, but basically this is one myth. One thing that I thought was true that is not, is that you can overdose on fentanyl just strictly by touching it. I'm supposing that if it was on your skin for quite a while that you could, but if you notice it and wash it off, then you can't. That's what they're saying. However, breathing it in is a different story altogether. And the fact that there is all of this guidance and that there was just this July an OIG investigation done of Customs and Border Patrol storage facilities where they're keeping fentanyl because they're intercepting so much of it. Management did not adequately protect employees from possible fentanyl exposure. It is an issue. Fentanyl exposure is an issue. You cannot say it's not an issue. They have, I think it's called Narcan, I believe. This is a lethal dose of fentanyl next to a penny, okay? If this stuff is being stored or if it gets in the air and you breathe it in, you can die. Plain and simple. So I was wrong about first responders touching it with their skin and just automatically overdosing. Fine. I'm glad I learned the truth. I wish I was wrong on this 100% of the way because it would be much better if this stuff wasn't happening and it wasn't true. But this is an Office of Inspector General report on what the CBP needs to do to make it more safe for Customs and Border Patrol agents to deal with this stuff. They had naloxone in a lockbox and nobody knew how to get in there, even though the password was taped onto the box. Just all kinds of things here. Now, I want to address something else, okay? There was an anesthesiologist saying that he worked with fentanyl every day, which is common in anesthesiology, or somebody who purports to be one. I don't know for sure. I haven't seen their credentials, so we'll say that. Saying that he deals with it every day, and he's actually squirted it all over himself and never had a problem. And I said to him, how often is it in the hospital setting that you're dealing with powdered fentanyl? I don't think it's very often because I looked it up because he didn't answer me. This drug in the 25-ton quantity that it came overseas from was in powdered form. And I'm going to get to the water supply and I'm going to get to the terroristic portion of this in a moment because I did research that as well. But this gentleman or woman who was talking about this, I don't think deals with illicit powdered fentanyl in the hospital setting. So I think that there's a big difference in an illicitly prepared substance that is done by God knows who in Shanghai, China, and what they prepare for hospital settings for medical use is different. I asked him when he dealt with a powdered version of fentanyl because I was trying to make that point. When do you ever see anesthesiologists or even pharmacists in hospitals mixing powder into any drug like this, any opioid like this, so I didn't go through the exercise of compiling every article with every police officer that has gone to the hospital for fentanyl exposure because it would have been an exhaustive process. And the argument is this isn't true. All of these officers are just having panic attacks. They're not dealing with fentanyl toxicity at all. They're just thinking that they're dealing with it. So they give themselves a panic attack. And that's what the problem is. Which I just find insulting to law enforcement. I really do. I find it insulting to law enforcement that you will say that them encountering a powdered substance that they may accidentally breathe or touch on their skin, or maybe their skin's a little moister, has more moisture one moment than it does the other, and they start to feel ill effects, are crazy and just doing, it's all in their head, and they're experiencing a panic attack and not the drugs. I just have a problem with that personally. Could it be possible in every case? Anything's possible. I mean, anything's possible. It could be that every single officer who was brought to the hospital for what they thought was fentanyl toxicity was just having a panic attack. I guess. I don't know. Anyway, what I really then started looking into too is what is the chance of whatever this shipment was that was seized in Mexico being used as a weapon. Fentanyl is a member of the class of drugs known as fentanyls, rapid-acting opioid drugs that alleviate pain without causing loss of consciousness. Fentanyl depresses central nervous system and respiratory function. Exposure to fentanyl may be fatal. Okay. Fentanyl and other opioids could possibly be used as an incapacitating agent to impair a person's ability to function. And they talk about that Russian military incident. Methods of dissemination. Indoor air. Fentanyl can be released into indoor air as fine particles or liquid sprays. Water. Fentanyl can be used to contaminate water. Food. Fentanyl can be used to contaminate food. Outdoor air. Fentanyl can be released into outdoor air as fine particles or liquid spray. Agricultural. If fentanyl is released into the air as fine particles or liquid spray, it has the potential to contaminate agricultural products. Routes of exposure. Fentanyl can be absorbed into the body via inhalation, oral exposure, or ingestion, or skin contact. It is not known whether fentanyl can be absorbed systemically through the eye. Fentanyl can be administered intravenously, intramuscularly, or as a skin patch. And then they go in to the zones and what should be done by emergency personnel responding to them. In other words, yes, it can poison the water supply. Yes, it can contaminate the food supply. Yes, it can go into outdoor air as fine particles or spray, and indoors as fine particles or spray. Can you just imagine how deadly a 25-ton powdered shipment of fentanyl would be for anybody if it was used in this way? Now, I really don't see why there needs to be an argument here. And I'm quite frankly, like, really taken aback because as somebody who's just read media reporting on the dangers of encountering this substance and the dangers of it in terms of ingesting it or taking it or abusing it or accidentally abusing it. I've read today plenty of articles where they talk about how ecstasy is being laced with fentanyl now, and people don't realize that they're taking fentanyl when they're taking the ecstasy and they're dying. I mean, you know, it's horrific. It's horrible. It's scary. And so tweeting the thread that I tweeted about exposure to fentanyl, the officers that have said that they have been exposed to fentanyl and dealing with the ill effects, and then seeing the quality and caliber of people who have come to attack me about it, I just have to wonder, like, let's pretend there was one doctor I blocked who said he was a doctor. Because he's saying he's a doctor and that everybody's crazy and we're all nut jobs and how could we be saying these things and it's misinformation and stop spreading this nonsense and all the petty bullshit, okay? And instead of taking the opportunity to educate people like me, who's really sincerely interested in learning about this, if that's not proper and correct, I want to correct it. That's what we're here for, is the truth. That's why I spent the entire day on this. Why are you taking the opportunity to scold and yell at and shame people for not knowing what you purport to know as a physician, instead of taking the opportunity to educate people on it? So it devolved into this nasty, gross back and forth where I've been like infiltrated by these people. And I'm just not having it anymore. I did the research myself. You guys on that side of the aisle that have said that this stuff is not true, that exposure to fentanyl, you know, by first responders is not going to harm them. I agree with you on the skin contact, but not on the inhalation. Sorry, not sorry. Research the hell out of it. Sorry. I just don't. The only thing that is being cited that holds any weight, to be honest, was this American College of Medical Toxicity study or paper that was done. And it's literally, again, circularly referenced by everyone else. So this one, like, if I were investigating whether or not there was a piece of fake news floating around, and this were the case, I would discount the news because it's basically circularly reporting this one press release. Every single article written is saying, well, ACMT says. So that's how I would deal with it. Now, I'll also admit that when I posted this thread, I was nowhere near as informed as I am right now. And that's only because I read article after article after article over a period of months of officers having these problems, and it terrifies the living daylights out of me. I think that we should all be able to agree that fentanyl is a big problem, and arguing about whether our first responders should protect themselves before entering a space where they could encounter this absolutely deadly substance when mistreated or misused. Like, what do you want them to do? Just not protect themselves? Should the officers just run in there without doing anything to, make sure that they're safe from whatever they're going to be dealing with? I think that that's asinine. Why would they do that? Especially when you've got guidance from like 7 different government agencies instructing people on how to take care of this and how to protect themselves. So, number one, when you have an opportunity to educate people, snarkiness and nastiness and holier than thou soapboxing does nothing to get your message across. Number 2, you just look like petulant little children, okay? Flat out. Number 3, I think that every police officer, given the guidance that I've been reading, and the fact that this can go airborne, or if somebody was on my thread and said that they're a law enforcement officer, and that one of their colleagues opened up a package and a puff of this stuff came out and they breathed it in, and here we have some jerk sitting there talking about how she's wrong and her coworker didn't die. And here's this person saying, dude, he inhaled it and he died. And no amount of Narcan could save him. It didn't matter. So there's literally no reason for people not to anticipate this and protect themselves from it. It's just the most ass-backwards thing to argue with somebody about. I don't know why you're doing it. The only thing I can think of is that the stigmatizing of the drug user and the possibility that they might not rapidly get the help they need to survive an overdose is stopping these people from understanding why law enforcement may want to protect themselves from this substance. Should they start doing more toxicology on these officers that are claiming to be exposed? Maybe that would help, because if they all come back negative, then we can lend more credence to the panic attack theory. And EMS as well, you're absolutely right. Fire too. First responders in general. But I don't see any reason to deter people from protecting themselves when going into a possible situation where you're dealing with a drug that a little tiny fleck of can kill you. Why are you arguing with people about this? It just doesn't make sense to me. Protect yourself anyway. Be prepared for it. Why not? Maybe I'm just, I don't know. Maybe I'm crazy. Am I crazy? Am I crazy? I don't know. I don't think I'm crazy. I think that being careful is good. I don't think that first responders are running away from these calls. Like, they deal with they run into danger 24 hours a day. But fentanyl is causing them to run in the other direction. They face gunshots, murderers, terrorists, all kinds of horrible situations every day head on. But fentanyl gives them power to panic attacks. I don't know. Anyway, like I said, I'll provide all the research I did. And like I said, there are about, let me see, there is no chance of fentanyl harming you from contact and exposure. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 11 articles that I compiled and read. On the definitely a harm, I have 3 that say it's definitely a harm, and one of them comes from the Ministry of Public Safety and Solicitor General in Canada, British Columbia, I'm sorry. Let's be specific. Why is fentanyl so dangerous for first responders? How to safely handle it on scene. First responders are currently adapting to the danger that fentanyl presents to their personal safety. So basically, the this can't happen people are arguing against the fact that it can harm first responders, and other people like the government are saying that it can harm first responders. That's what this whole thing was about. I say, let's get the freaking fentanyl off the streets. Let's stop these shipments coming in from our southern border. Let's stop this nonsense before a gazillion people can die from this. Like we just read about how it can contaminate the water system. I really highly doubt that 25 tons of powdered fentanyl is going to be used to street deal. I'm just saying. And I've got a bunch of comments here from YouTube, from Twitter, of people saying that they've had experiences with this in the health in the medical industry and have been warned on skin contact themselves. So basically, the skin contact thing, honestly, from what I've read, I'm not 100% sold on how rapidly it can affect you. Like if you catch it and wash it off, you should be fine. In terms of inhalation, I think that's a whole different ballgame. And, you know, while I guess walking into a room where there's like a bag of this on the table or a substance on the table isn't immediately, is it an immediate harm to you? But if you see it, you should put a mask on. What if they decide to blow that up in the air? I really feel like this needs the attention that it's getting. And I feel like people need to be careful. And I will provide all of you guys the information that you can read for yourselves and come to your own conclusions on. But I'm definitely not going to be bullied about being worried about first responders encountering fentanyl and the dangers of fentanyl. Sorry, not sorry. And that's it. If you guys appreciate the work that I do, you can find me on Patreon, patreon.com/TracyBeans with the Z. If you would like to send me a PayPal, it's paypal.me/TracyBeans. And again, all day on this damn thing, but it was worth it. So thank you guys. This is a serious problem we're dealing with in this country, and petty squabbling over whether or not our first responders are in danger on site of an overdose or drug deal or drug bust or whatever is a really useless use of our time. We should be working together to stop this crap, not fighting with each other about how dangerous it is for first responders. Have a fantastic